My name is Maya, and I've reached the age of 28. Last evening, my sister Chloe leveled an accusation against me, claiming I had pilfered her diamond necklace, a piece of jewelry I had never so much as touched. As I stood there utterly bewildered, my mother, Denise, shrieked, "You have always harbored envy towards her." My father, Marcus, gestured emphatically towards the exit. "Depart. I will not permit a thief to reside under my roof." They then expelled me from the premises. However, as I sat in my vehicle, feeling utterly disgraced and chilled to the bone, tears were not my sole recourse. I accessed my banking application. I halted the mortgage disbursement for their residence. I suspended the tuition remittance for Chloe's exclusive university. Furthermore, I terminated the lease payment for her brand new BMW. They possessed absolutely no inkling that their so-called errant daughter was the sole entity preventing their seemingly flawless existence from imploding. Before I divulge the subsequent events, kindly inform me of your viewing location in the comments section below. Please bestow upon this content a like and consider subscribing if you have ever found yourself cast as the problematic offspring within a family that steadfastly refused to acknowledge your intrinsic value. The obligatory Sunday repast. My father, Marcus, insists upon its regularity. He refers to it as the preservation of familial cohesion. I, on the other hand, deem it my weekly ordeal of degradation. I took my seat at the impeccably polished mahogany table, endeavoring to become imperceptible, while my sister Chloe held center stage. She is 31 years of age, the favored child, and she never allows anyone to forget it. She was radiating, recounting her recent visit to meet her fiancé Ryan's family. Ryan embodies precisely what my parents envisioned for her: affluent, well-connected, and of their social standing. "They were profoundly impressed with me," Chloe declared, ostentatiously displaying her new engagement ring for the 10th time. Ryan's mother, Cynthia, remarked that I possessed an inherent aristocratic bearing, stating I blend in seamlessly. My mother, Denise, beamed. "This is her ultimate satisfaction." "Of course, my dear. Our lineage demands certain standards. We are a family of repute." She uttered the word reputable, yet her gaze pierced directly through me. "It is a blessing," she implied, "that at least one of her daughters comprehends the paramount importance of outward appearances." I disregarded her pronouncements. Discreetly beneath the table, I retrieved my mobile device, perusing the pre-market stock futures. I am a day trader. My family interprets this profession as indicative of my failure. Who wastes time interacting with a computer? They remain oblivious to the fact that my playing is what finances the very shelter above their heads. I was so engrossed in a stock chart that I failed to notice my elbow was perilously close to my water goblet. As I repositioned my arm, I inadvertently tipped the glass. Ice and water cascaded onto the table, abruptly interrupting Chloe's mid-brag. The table fell into an unnerving silence, Chloe's eyes fixed on the spreading puddle encroaching upon her designer handbag. Then her gaze shifted to me. Her countenance, which had been alight with a smile merely moments before, contorted into an expression of pure rage. "Maya!" she bellowed, her voice reverberating through the dining chamber. "You are incapable of performing a single task correctly, are you? You obliterate everything." I swiftly procured my napkin, attempting to absorb the spillage. "My apologies, Chloe, it was an unintended mishap." However, Chloe was no longer focused on the spilled water. Her hand flew to her neck, her meticulously manicured fingers patting her clavicle. Her complexion, previously flushed with anger, turned stark white with alarm. "Oh, wait," she stammered, her voice suddenly sharp. "My necklace, where is my necklace?" Before anyone could respond, she violently shoved her chair backward, nearly toppling it, and sprinted from the dining room, ascending the stairs 2 at a time. "What is she referring to?" My father, Marcus, grumbled, clearly irked by this latest disruption. My mother, Denise, appeared anxious. She had been adorned with the diamond necklace Cynthia had presented her, a gift from Ryan's mother. "Oh, I sincerely hope she has merely misplaced it." From upstairs we heard a frantic shriek, followed by the unmistakable sounds of drawers being forcefully yanked open and slammed shut. The heavy, desperate thud of her footsteps returning down the hallway was palpable. Chloe reappeared in the doorway, but this time her distress was evident. She was weeping. Profound, theatrical sobs that immediately galvanized my parents into a state of heightened concern. "It's gone!" she wailed, clutching her hands together. "My diamond necklace, the one from Cynthia, it has vanished. I placed it on my dresser for precisely 5 minutes, and now it is no longer there." The room instantly descended into pandemonium. My mother rushed to her side. "Oh, my darling, are you quite certain? Perhaps it has fallen behind the dresser. When did you last observe it?" "I know precisely where I saw it, mother." Chloe's tear-filled eyes locked onto mine, her expression transforming from sheer panic to a chilling, resolute accusation. She raised a trembling digit and pointed it directly at me, spanning the entire length of the table. "It was you. You are responsible for this." I remained frozen, the napkin still clutched in my hand. "What are you implying?" "You have been fixated upon it all evening," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You have been consumed by envy of me and Ryan since the very outset. You are nothing more than a pathetic failure, and the sight of my happiness was unbearable to you. Hence you absconded with it." "Chloe, that is preposterous. I did not abscond with your necklace," I countered, my voice trembling. "I did not even enter your chamber. I ascended to my room solely to retrieve my phone charger. That is the extent of it." My mother, Denise, scoffed. "A phone charger? Now, during dinner, you are a truly deplorable deceiver, Maya." "It is the truth," I insisted, looking pleadingly at my father. "Father, corroborate my assertion. Do not deceive me, Maya." Chloe shrieked, her face contorted and flushed. "You are merely an envious pilferer." Before I could utter another word, she stormed past me and made a direct dash towards my sleeping quarters. "Chloe, what are you doing?" I cried out, giving chase. "Remove yourself from my chamber." She paid me no heed. She burst through my bedroom portal and commenced a frenzied ransacking of the premises. She unceremoniously yanked open my dresser drawers, discarding my garments upon the floor. "Cease this," I implored, attempting to restrain her arm. "You cannot simply trespass here and behave in such a manner." "Remove your hands from me, thief," she spat, violently propelling me against the wall. My parents, Marcus and Denise, remained passively in the doorway, observing the scene unfold. They made no move to intervene, nor did they attempt to quell her actions. "Observe!" Chloe exulted, continuing her search. "She is volatile. She is culpable." Chloe ripped a pillow from my bed, and there, resting upon the mattress, lay a small silver hair clasp. I froze. Chloe snatched it up, her eyes alight with malevolent triumph. She brandished it aloft, marching back towards the hallway where my parents stood. "Here!" she shrieked, thrusting it directly into my parents' faces. "I informed you that you were in my chamber. I discovered this beneath my pillow earlier. She must have dropped it while absconding with the necklace." My mother gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh, Maya, how could you?" My father's countenance darkened to a deep crimson, but I found myself rendered speechless, fixated solely on the hair clasp. That was my hair clasp, the one my dearest companion had bestowed upon me, the very item I had been diligently searching for throughout the entire week. She had not discovered it beneath her pillow. She had simply retrieved it from beneath mine. She must have appropriated it from me days prior. secreted it within my room, and was now fabricating a narrative regarding its discovery. She was orchestrating my downfall, and my parents were unequivocally accepting every syllable of her falsehoods. "I am being framed," I cried, desperation surging within my throat. "Mother, father, do you not comprehend? She procured that hair clasp from me days ago. She planted it. She is fabricating this entire scenario." I implored my mother, Denise. "Mother, I beseech you, you must lend credence to my words. I have absconded with nothing." My mother's countenance, which had previously appeared pallid with concern, hardened into an unyielding mask of unadulterated fury. She advanced, and before I could even register her intent, her hand struck my face with resounding force. The impact was so profound that my head snapped to the side, my cheek instantly aflame. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice a low, venomous whisper. "You stand here, apprehended in the act, and yet you persist in perpetuating falsehoods to my face. You accuse your own sister." "But I—" "Silence," she commanded, her voice escalating. "Simply cease speaking. I comprehend this situation with absolute clarity. You are plagued by envy. You have perpetually harbored envy towards Chloe. Envy of her existence, envy of her companions, envy of her betrothed. You are incapable of tolerating her felicity." She jabbed a finger forcefully into my chest. "You and your pathetic little computer occupation. We are all cognizant of your impecuniosity. We all understand that you are a failure. You likely harbored the delusion that you could liquidate that necklace. Did you truly believe we would remain unaware? You are not merely a failure, Maya. You are a fabricator and a thief." Her pronouncements inflicted wounds far more grievous than the physical blow. I gazed past her, my eyes settling on my father, Marcus. He had remained conspicuously silent throughout this entire exchange, his arms crossed, merely observing. "Father," I whispered, "she is fabricating. You are aware that I would never perpetrate such an act." My father met my gaze for a prolonged, frigid moment. I detected no flicker of doubt in his eyes, no trace of compassion, only an overwhelming sense of disdain. He slowly shook his head. "I invariably foresaw that you would achieve nothing of consequence," he declared, his voice devoid of emotion and final, "merely a worthless failure occupied with a computer. And now you are also a common thief." The finality in my father's tone was absolute. "I have no need for a thief within this household," Marcus stated, his voice chillingly calm. He extended a thick finger in my direction. "I require no daughter who brings such opprobrium upon my dwelling." "Father, I did not," I whispered, but my words were futile. He had already rendered his verdict. He strode towards the dining room chair where my handbag rested. Before I could react, he seized it. "What are you doing?" He offered no reply. He gripped my arm with a vice-like pressure, his fingers digging into my bicep, and began to propel me towards the front entrance. "Father, desist. You are causing me harm." "Escort her from the premises, Marcus." My mother, Denise, instructed from the hallway, her arms folded. Her tears had long since ceased. Her expression was now one of unmitigated coldness. "Release me!" I struggled, attempting to extricate myself from his grasp, but his strength was formidable. He dragged me through the entryway, past the framed family portraits adorning the walls, images of Chloe receiving accolades, of my parents on vacation, none of me. He fumbled with the deadbolt, his grip on my arm unwavering, and wrenched open the front door. The frigid nocturnal air struck my face, a stark contrast to the stifling heat of the dining room. "Depart," he growled. He shoved me forcefully, causing me to stumble onto the porch. He then raised my handbag aloft. "Do you desire this?" He did not await a response. He drew his arm back and hurled my bag across the verdant expanse of the lawn. It landed with a soft thud in the damp grass near the sidewalk. "Leave," he roared, "and never presume to return. You are no longer my daughter." "Father!" I cried out one final time as he retreated indoors. "Marcus, the neighbors," I heard my mother interject urgently, but my father merely regarded me with an expression of pure contempt. "She is an embarrassment," he spat, and then the heavy oak portal slammed shut. The decisive click of the deadbolt sliding into its housing was the most resonant sound I had ever encountered. I stood there on the porch, my cheeks still tingling from my mother's resounding slap, my arm throbbing from my father's bruising grip. The weight of humiliation settled upon my chest like a physical burden, constricting my breath. I was trembling not only from the biting cold, but from the sheer shock of it all. My legs unsteady, I stumbled down the porch steps. I traversed the dew-kissed grass towards my handbag, retrieved it, and trudged to the curb where my aged automobile was parked. It was a 15-year-old sedan, the very vehicle I deliberately maintained to perpetuate my image of failure, the one car my family would never deign to borrow. I entered and closed the door. The silence within the car was deafening. I simply remained seated, gazing at the immaculate, warmly illuminated domicile, my former abode, the residence that was no longer my home. And then, at long last, the tears began to flow. Not mere tears, but deep, racking sobs that convulsed my entire being. I was not merely weeping for the necklace I hadn't stolen, for the slap, or for being unceremoniously ejected. I was weeping for 28 years of ceaseless endeavor, 28 years of never quite measuring up. I sat in the profound darkness of my antiquated sedan. The sound of my own sorrowful cries echoed within the confined space. A failure, a thief, the very appellations my parents had uttered. They stung, leaving an indelible scar upon my soul, much like my mother's slap had left a crimson welt upon my cheek. I wept for the abject humiliation. I wept because after 28 years of striving, I had ultimately been discarded. However, as the minutes elapsed, the scalding tears of shame began to transform into a chilling resolve. A different recollection surged through the waves of pain, a memory from precisely 1 year ago. It was not situated within the dining room. It unfolded in my actual residence, the penthouse, a sanctuary they remained unaware of until desperation forced their hand. They had arrived unannounced, circumventing the doorman by proclaiming a family emergency. My father, Marcus, a man I had hitherto perceived solely as a dignified patriarch, was on his knees pressed against my polished concrete floor. "Maya," he began, his voice faltering, I was laid off." His face was a sickly grey. "6 months ago, I have been subsisting on my severance, but it has all been depleted. The bank is initiating foreclosure proceedings. Maya?" My mother Denise stood beside him, her hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles were bone white. "They are seizing the house," she whispered, her eyes red-rimmed from copious weeping. "Our home." I distinctly recall their pleading gazes. "You must rescue us," my father implored. "We are aware of your capabilities. You excel at operating computers. We know you possess financial resources." I happened to see a bank statement that erroneously arrived at the house. And then my mother seized my hand, her grip like that of a vice. "But you absolutely cannot inform Chloe. Do you comprehend me, Maya? She is at a crucial, delicate juncture with Ryan. If his affluent family perceives any indication of financial instability, if she suffers any loss of faith, it will irrevocably shatter her entire future." They had not merely requested my assistance, they had implored me to extricate them from their predicament covertly. They had asked me to perpetuate Chloe's ostensibly perfect existence, to continue funding her exorbitant tuition at Parsons, to maintain the facade of a respectable family unit, all while I was compelled to continue embodying the role of the penniless, inconsequential daughter. And I complied. Back in the frigid, damp confines of my vehicle, my tears ceased entirely. The shock dissipated, supplanted by an icy, acute sense of calm. They had not merely expelled me, they had cast aside their lifeline. "You desire me to vanish?" I whispered to the deserted street, the image of my mother's incandescently furious visage flashing in my mind. I wiped my cheeks, smearing the remnants of my tears. I reached into my handbag and retrieved my mobile device. Very well. I remained seated in the driver's seat, the engine quiescent. The sole sound was the faint, rhythmic ticking of the cooling engine. My breath fogged the windshield, obscuring the imposing structure that was no longer my home. However, the fog clouding my mind had entirely dissipated. The humiliation, the profound pain, they were still present, but something else had taken root, a cold, unyielding clarity. They had not simply ejected me, they had cast aside their sole provider. They had once implored me to salvage them, to safeguard their secrets, to finance their ostentatious lives, all the while treating me with the utmost disdain, as if I were mere detritus beneath their feet. They had definitively made their selection. Now I would formulate mine. My hand was remarkably steady as I reached for my mobile device. I unlocked it. My thumb tapped the icon for my private banking application. Not the rudimentary consumer interface my parents utilized, but rather the one inextricably linked to my trading accounts. The one they remained entirely oblivious to. My facial recognition engaged, and the application launched. My account balance was clearly displayed, a figure comprising 7 digits, but I paid it no heed. I navigated directly to the scheduled payments tab. There it was, the catalogue of their lives, sustained by my endeavours. My finger hovered for a fleeting moment before decisively pressing down. Firstly, the mortgage payment, attributed to Marcus and Denise Miller, a monthly debit of $4,800. I tapped Cancel Recurring Payment. A confirmation prompt appeared. Are you unequivocally certain? I selected Confirm. Secondly, the tuition installment for the esteemed Parsons School of Design, a semesterly charge amounting to $28,500. Cancel recurring payment. Are you unequivocally certain? Confirm. Chloe would undoubtedly receive an intriguing electronic missive tomorrow. Thirdly, the lease payment for the BMW 5 Series, Chloe's vehicle, a monthly expenditure of $950. Cancel recurring payment. Confirm. Finally, I paused at the last entry. The family health insurance plan, encompassing Marcus and Denise Miller. This was the most significant expenditure, the one that covered all of them, including my father's vital cardiac medication. My finger did not even falter. Cancel recurring payment. Confirm. A final notification screen appeared, detailing the modifications. All 4 disbursements were now officially designated as cancelled. I closed the application, locked the device, and placed it on the vacant passenger seat. The silence within the vehicle now possessed a different resonance. It was no longer the silence of utter despair. It was the profound silence of absolute control. I turned the ignition key. The aging engine emitted a low rumble to life. I engaged the gear shift, pulled away from the curb, and did not cast a backward glance. I did not seek refuge in a budget motel. I did not impose upon a friend's hospitality. I simply continued driving, my hands firmly gripping the steering wheel of my aging sedan. I drove for 20 minutes, leaving their placid, judgmental suburban enclave far behind, and set my course towards the radiant luminescence of the city's core. The residual embers of anger and humiliation still smoldered within my chest. But beneath their flickering flames, a cold, unyielding clarity was taking firm hold. They perceived me as a failure. They considered me utterly worthless. They possessed not the faintest inkling of my true identity. I steered into the discreet, subterranean ingress of the Luminina. This was no ordinary edifice. This was the luxurious high-rise, the very one Chloe and my mother avidly perused in society publications, the one they harbored aspirations of visiting for a day trip. My key fob emitted a soft beep, and the formidable security gate smoothly ascended, granting me access to the private residential garage. I parked my 15-year-old vehicle, an emblem of my supposed failure, precisely between a resplendent black Lamborghini and a dark green Bentley. The juxtaposition was undeniably comical. I allowed myself a faint, sardonic smile. I bypassed the main lobby entirely. My key fob summoned the private elevator. It opened with an almost ethereal silence, and I stepped inside. I depressed the button designated for the penthouse. The doors reopened, not revealing a hallway, but rather granting direct access into my personal sanctuary. It was an expansive space with floor-to-ceiling windows encircling the entire apartment, offering a breathtaking panoramic vista of the cityscape. The flooring consisted of exquisitely polished dark marble. The furnishings exuded a minimalist, contemporary aesthetic. It was tranquil. It was immaculate. It was secure. This was my genuine home, the one I had acquired outright with cash. I proceeded past the state-of-the-art culinary area and entered my dedicated office. 6 substantial monitors were affixed to the wall, their screens glowing in the ambient darkness. They were alive with the vibrant green and red lines of the global stock market. This was my much-derided, pathetic computer job. This was my obsessive pursuit, demanding 10 hours daily, yielding 7 figures annually. This was the empire I had meticulously constructed. While they were proclaiming my worthlessness, I activated the high-end espresso machine. The rich aroma of freshly brewed coffee began to permeate the air, effectively dispelling the lingering scent of my mother's perfume and Chloe's insidious falsehoods. I glanced at the clock. The London market was poised to commence its trading session imminently. I savoured a sip of the robust, piping hot coffee, the internal conflagration in my chest finally subsiding, replaced by a cold, resolute determination. It was time to commence my labour. As I settled into my ergonomic leather chair, my secondary mobile device, my private line, began to ring. The one my family remained entirely unaware of. The sun streamed into my office, its rays glinting off the glass and steel of the towering structures outside. The London market had exhibited considerable volatility, yet I had already secured a profit exceeding $40,000 before 9 o'clock in the morning. This was my established routine. This was my authentic existence. The mortification from the previous evening, the spilled water, the stinging slap, the ignominious ejection onto the damp lawn, all felt distant, akin to scenes from a fictional narrative about an entirely different individual. On the polished marble island of my kitchen, situated adjacent to my premium espresso machine, my secondary phone commenced vibrating. It was the inexpensive prepaid device I retained exclusively for their use. The burner phone, the one that complemented the 15-year-old automobile, and the persona of failure they so adamantly insisted I embodied. The screen illuminated with her designation, Chloe. A year prior, my heart would have leaped into my throat. I would have fumbled to answer, desperately seeking to appease, consumed by dread of her demands. Now I merely observed its insistent buzzing. It rang and rang, its agitated, rattling sound echoing in the profound silence of my penthouse apartment. I let it continue. I lifted my coffee cup, took a slow, deliberate sip, and gazed out over the expansive cityscape. A few moments later, the phone buzzed once more. A notification appeared indicating a new voicemail. Curiosity piqued, I tapped the notification and activated the speaker function. I was eager to hear her escalating panic reverberate within my personal space. Chloe's voice, typically so smooth and patronizing, was now a high-pitched, frantic shriek. "Maya, where are you? Answer the phone, you imbecile. Just answer it." The message concluded. A second later, a familiar beep. Another recording commenced. "Maya, I am not jesting. I have just received an electronic notification from Parsons. My tuition payment has been regrettably declined. It was declined. What exactly did you do? What did you impart to mother and father? They are also not responding to their telephones. What is transpiring?" I took another measured sip of coffee. The intricate charts displayed on my primary monitor were uniformly trending in a positive green hue. It was destined to be an exceptionally prosperous day. Beep. A third voicemail. "You are attempting to sabotage my wedding, are you not? You deranged individual. You are simply consumed by envy of me and Ryan. You are actively endeavoring to undermine me. Answer this telephone without further delay, or I solemnly swear I will. The conversation concluded as her threats seemed to run dry. My penthouse returned to its accustomed quietude, the stillness disturbed only by the low hum of my trading computers. I observed the notification on the antiquated phone's display. 3 new voicemails awaited. I retrieved the device. My thumb hesitated momentarily over the callback option before shifting to the right. I selected all 3 recordings. I moved them towards the refuse icon. A query appeared. "Delete 3 messages," I confirmed. Turning my attention back to my monitors, the market beckoned. I was engrossed in deciphering a complex options transaction on the Japanese exchange when the old burner phone began to clatter against the marble surface once more. A glance at the screen revealed it was my mother. I watched it vibrate, her name illuminated with an urgent plea. I recalled her contorted expression of fury the previous night, her accusation of theft. I remembered the sharp sting of her palm. The ringing ceased. Shortly after, the voicemail alert materialized. I amplified the speaker volume, curious for the next installment of their escalating distress. Denise's voice emerged, not with a shriek like Chloe's, but a high-pitched, incensed murmur, the tone she employed when struggling to suppress her ire publicly. "Maya, I have no clue what malevolent charade you believe you are orchestrating, but you must cease it immediately." A brief silence followed, punctuated by a faint beeping, suggesting she was in a retail establishment. "Your father's credit card was just refused at the golf club. In front of his associates, he was compelled to have Bill Johnson settle his midday meal. Do you comprehend the mortification?" Her voice grew strained. "And my card, my American Express. It was declined at Whole Foods. My cart was completely filled, Maya, entirely full. I was forced to abandon everything, every last item. The cashier was observing me. Every patron in the queue was looking. I have never experienced such profound embarrassment in my entire existence." She was almost hissing now. "What is transpiring? What actions have you taken? Contact me without delay. You are bringing shame upon this entire lineage." The voicemail concluded. I remained still for a moment, absorbing her words. There was no inquiry about my well-being, no admission of a potential misstep, not even a question as to the motive behind my actions. Simply, "You are disgracing this family." That was the entirety of it. Reputational standing, humiliation, the perceptions of others. I retrieved the burner phone. I accessed the call history. Chloe's unanswered calls, my mother's. I calmly navigated to my contacts. I located Chloe. I initiated the block contact function. A confirmation prompt appeared. "Are you certain?" I confirmed. I located my mother. I initiated the block contact function. Confirmed. I inverted the phone, screen facing down, to avoid even the visual interruption of its illumination. The quietude in my penthouse felt purifying. The following morning found me in my element. The Asian markets had just commenced trading, and I was monitoring a complex price fluctuation in a technology stock. My penthouse office was a silent expanse, illuminated solely by the glow of my 6 monitors. I felt a profound sense of focus. I felt in command. The memory of Sunday evening, my father's hands forcibly expelling me from the premises, seemed like a distant recollection from a past existence. I had rendered their numbers inaccessible. I had severed all connections. A small notification materialized on my 4th monitor, designated for personal correspondence. It was an email. The sender was Chloe. My finger hovered over the delete command. I had blocked her number, but the prospect of her email address had eluded my foresight. A sharp, cold curiosity overwhelmed my better judgment. I opened it. The subject line was a chaotic string of capital letters and punctuation. The body of the message was an outpouring of unadulterated fury. You believe yourself exceptionally shrewd, do you not? You imagine you can elude detection. I had to acknowledge her swiftness. It had taken her less than 48 hours to ascertain that her tuition and vehicle payments were directly tied to her sister, whom she deemed a failure. The bank contacted me. The bank? They informed me that my BMW 5 Series is slated for repossession. They cited a failed automatic payment. What did you do? You utterly worthless individual. You are intent on sabotaging my existence. First, my education, now my automobile. Father remains hospitalized due to your actions. And this is your response. You are malevolent, Maya. Utterly malevolent. I reread the email twice. The excessive capitalization, the palpable desperation. Her concern was not for our father's hospitalization. Her focus was on her vehicle. Her apprehension was regarding the image she projected to Ryan and his affluent family. She was petrified of appearing impoverished. I examined the email. I then surveyed my trading terminal, which indicated I had accumulated more that morning than her prized BMW was even worth. I felt no anger. I felt no guilt. I felt an absolute void. I engaged the forward function. I entered a new email address. TRASH. I transmitted the message. Subsequently, I performed a right-click on her email address. A menu appeared. I guided the cursor downward and selected Block Sender. It was almost pitiable. For 28 years, I had lived in perpetual dread of Chloe's wrath. Her vocal outbursts, her insults, her methods of diminishing me. Now her rage, even conveyed through all caps, felt akin to a child's tantrum. It could not penetrate my current sanctuary. It could not tarnish my accomplishments. She was incandescent with fury that I had confiscated her plaything, a plaything for which I bore the financial responsibility. A vehicle she drove while I navigated my 15-year-old sedan, a car I permitted them to observe, thereby perpetuating their sense of superiority. The irony was overwhelming. She, the favored child, was utterly dependent on the failure she scorned. I took a sip of my coffee, preparing to resume my work. I was finished with them. I had severed every communication channel. And then the intercom chimed. The sharp, invasive sound startled me. I glanced towards the security panel mounted on the wall, the screen illuminated, displaying the lobby below. Frank, my doorman, looked up at the camera, his expression fraught with concern. I activated the intercom. Yes, Frank, Ms. Miller. I sincerely apologize. There are 2 women downstairs, a Mrs. Denise Miller and a Ms. Chloe Miller. Well, ma'am, they are creating a considerable disturbance. They are adamantly demanding to be escorted to your residence. The intercom's sharp buzz pierced the stillness of the penthouse. It was a discordant, unwelcome intrusion into her sanctuary. I directed my gaze to the security panel on the wall. The screen flickered to life, revealing the face of Frank, the building's chief doorman. He appeared flustered. I depressed the button, and his voice emanated from the speaker. "Ms. Miller, I regret to intrude upon your time." Frank typically adopted an apologetic tone, but this instance carried an undeniable undertone of genuine distress. "There are 2 women currently in the lobby, Mrs. Denise Miller and Ms. Chloe Miller." He uttered their names as if questioning their presence, as though he found it inconceivable that these individuals were associated with the reserved, professional woman residing in the penthouse. "They are, well, ma'am, they are causing quite a scene. I could almost envision the tableau. My mother, Denise, pacing the polished marble expanse, her voice sharp and imperious. My sister Chloe, likely teetering on the verge of tears or, more plausibly, threatening to engage legal counsel she could ill afford. They were clearly out of their accustomed environment, and their reaction was a predictable descent into chaos. They insist they are your family and that you are anticipating their arrival," Frank continued, his voice taut. "Their volume is escalating. Other residents are beginning to take notice. Naturally they would. Humiliation was their family's primary currency, and they were adept at its expenditure, whether it be mine or their own." I exhaled a prolonged, slow sigh. I had blocked their phone lines. I had blocked their email accounts. I should have anticipated they would resort to such measures. They were akin to children persistently banging on a locked door, demanding entry to continue their destructive spree. I observed my trading monitors. The market was in motion. I had professional obligations. This was an unwelcome diversion, yet one I evidently had to address. "It is acceptable, Frank," I stated, my voice measured and even. I was anticipating them, though not precisely today. "A minor fabrication to assuage the doorman's unease. Send them up. I will manage the situation. Are you certain, Ms. Miller? I can dispatch security to escort them from the premises?" "No," I replied, a chilling resolve solidifying within me. It is time I confronted this directly. "Send them up. Yes, ma'am. Immediately." The connection severed with a click. The screen went dark. I rose from my workstation. I made no attempt to adjust my attire or smooth my hair. I exited my office, crossed the expansive, silent living area, and positioned myself before the private elevator doors that granted direct access to my residence. I clasped my arms across my chest. I fixed my gaze upon the brushed steel doors. I listened to the faint whirring of the elevator as it commenced its ascent. The failure, the thief, the disgrace was awaiting. The elevator chimed, a soft, refined tone announcing its arrival. I stood by the entrance to my penthouse, arms crossed, and waited. The brushed steel doors glided open soundlessly. My mother, Denise, and my sister, Chloe, stood within. For a full 3 seconds they remained motionless, simply staring. Their faces were masks of unadulterated astonishment. They were attired for a confrontation, prepared to storm a modest walk-up apartment, prepared to berate their deficient relative. This was entirely outside their expectations. Their eyes darted erratically, attempting to absorb the totality of the surroundings. They gazed past me through the grand foyer. They beheld the gleaming marble floors. They noted the 20-foot ceilings. They observed the immense 2-story expanse of glass, offering panoramic views of the entire city skyline. They appeared as if they had been abruptly transported to an alien landscape. Chloe was the first to regain her voice. Her mouth opened and closed, emitting a small, gasping sound. She looked from the apartment to me, then back again. I was merely standing there, clad in expensive, high-end athleisure wear. I was not the broken, pathetic figure she had forcibly ejected onto the lawn 2 days prior. You, she stammered, taking a trembling step out of the elevator. You reside here? I offered no verbal response. I merely raised an eyebrow. I allowed the silence and the vista to convey my message. Her bewilderment persisted for only a fleeting moment before contorting into her default emotional state. Pure, unbridled fury. The shock was instantaneously supplanted by accusation. Where did you acquire this? She shrieked, her voice high and piercing, echoing in the vast open space. Where did you obtain all this wealth? She advanced another step, her gaze narrowing. Oh my goodness, the necklace! You did steal it. You purloined it and subsequently pawned it. You thief, you procured all of this with my necklace. My mother, Denise, remained pallid, her handbag clutched to her chest as though I might abscond with it. She peered past me into my state-of-the-art kitchen, where the sub-zero refrigerator gleamed. Her reaction transcended mere shock. It registered as profound betrayal. Maya, all this time, she whispered, her voice trembling with a different form of anger. All this time, you have been deceiving us. Deceiving, I finally vocalized, my tone flat and frigid. I have been navigating my own life. It is you who constructed the narrative of my failure. You allowed us to worry about you, Denise implored, regaining her composure. You allowed us to believe you were destitute. You subjected your father and me to considerable stress concerning your survival, all while you resided in this palace. What manner of depraved charade are you enacting? Chloe remained fixated on her primary concern. My automobile, Maya, my tuition. You halted the payments. You possess this considerable wealth and you simply cut me off. You accused me of theft. I stated simply. You declared me envious. You stood by impassively as father expelled me onto the lawn. We were endeavoring to assist you, Chloe shrieked. We were attempting to impart a lesson, and you have been leading this clandestine existence. You have been pilfering from us. You are financing all of this by... She gestured wildly, searching for an explanation that aligned with her preconceived notions. You are involved in illicit drug activities, or perhaps you have some affluent gentleman supporting you. That is it not? You did not earn this. I nearly chuckled. It was profoundly pathetic. They were incapable of comprehending that I, the perceived failure, could have achieved such success independently. Their limited minds required the invention of a transgression or a benefactor to rationalize it. I uncrossed my arms and leaned against the doorframe. I observed my sister, her face flushed and distorted with rage. Then I looked at my mother, who was regarding me as if I were a monster. I earned it, I declared, my voice cold and distinct, cutting through their hysteria. I work, I trade, I generate revenue. I paused, then delivered the decisive blow. Unlike certain individuals, I earned it. I trade, I generate revenue, unlike certain individuals. My words, sharp and devoid of warmth, hung suspended in the air. Chloe's complexion shifted to an unseemly shade of crimson. She was on the precipice of another outburst. I could sense it brewing. She was about to lunge, to levy another accusation, any accusation that would serve to validate her distorted reality, but she was denied the opportunity. Your vehicle, Mother. Denise finally spoke. Her voice was low and trembling, not with shock, but with a pure, white-hot fury I had witnessed only a handful of times in my life. She pushed past Chloe, her gaze fixed on mine. The feigned concern regarding the hospital had evaporated. The performance had concluded. You are concerned about your automobile? She hissed at Chloe before redirecting her full intensity towards me. The bank contacted us, Maya. Her voice was not a scream. It was a low growl. Not about tuition, not about a BMW. The bank that holds the mortgage on our residence. The payment was declined. The foreclosure notice is en route. You orchestrated this." She lunged towards me, her hands raised as if to deliver another slap, mirroring her actions from 2 nights prior. I did not flinch. I did not even stir. I simply stood in the entryway of my penthouse, within my own domain, and met her gaze. I observed this woman, who had branded me a thief and a failure, completely unravel as her gravy train reached its terminus. She halted mere inches from striking me, her hand quivering in midair. The realization that I was not cowering, that I was not weeping, seemed to disorient her. "Why should I assume responsibility for the mortgage on a domicile from which I was ejected?" I inquired. My voice was quiet, composed, and eminently reasonable. Its resonance filled the expansive marble foyer. You owe us," Denise stammered, her fury faltering. We raised you. We provided sustenance. We granted you a home." "A home from which you expelled me," I retorted, my voice equally subdued. "You stood right there in that very home and witnessed your husband cast me onto the lawn. You labeled me a disgrace. You proclaimed me a thief. He declared I was no longer his daughter. One cannot disown an individual and subsequently anticipate them to settle one's financial obligations." I gazed at her, at this woman whom I had striven my entire existence to appease. I was no longer her daughter. I was no longer a failure. I was simply finished. "You should recall, Mrs. Miller," I stated clearly. "I was instructed to depart and never return. Consequently, I complied and I retained my financial autonomy." The appellation struck her with greater force than any physical blow. The fury on her countenance dissipated, replaced by an expression of pallid, sputtering, utter astonishment. You addressed me," she whispered, her hand dropping to her side. "You referred to me as Mrs. Miller." Denise's face contorted. My frigid, formal use of Mrs. Miller constituted a barrier she could not breach with anger. The rage in her eyes dissolved, giving way to a raw, desperate panic. This was not the daughter she could subjugate. This was a prosperous, unfeeling stranger who held their entire future in the palm of her hand. The tears that followed were genuine, but they were not tears of contrition. They were tears of sheer terror. "Maya, please," she sobbed, taking an awkward step forward, her hand extended towards me. "Maya, darling, you cannot do this. You are unable. That is our home. It is your father's home, the home where you were raised." "The home from which you cast me out," I stated, my voice toneless. "We were incensed," she wept, tears now coursing down her cheeks. "We committed an error. Your father, Marcus, his health is precarious. His heart, you are aware of his cardiac condition. Maya, this strain will prove fatal for him. It pertains to the family. You cannot simply abandon your family in such a manner." "Family," I echoed, the word tasting like ash. "Family does not frame their own sister. Family does not label their daughter a thief and then stand idly by as she is cast onto the lawn. You are merely doing this to inflict pain upon me." Chloe finally found her voice. She had been frozen by the elevator, paralyzed by the sight of my apartment, by the collapse of her world. I shifted my icy gaze towards her. "To inflict pain, Chloe? I am merely organizing my financial affairs. You might consider adopting a similar practice." I allowed a small, cold smile to grace my lips. "And speaking of finances, that particular tuition is rather costly, is it not? It must be challenging to scramble for payment now." I let the words linger, observing the color drain from her face. "You should have simply pawned the misplaced necklace." Chloe gasped, her hand flying to her mouth. She had no rejoinder. She understood that I possessed knowledge, or at least she recognized that I was not accepting her pathetic fabrication. She glanced desperately at her mother, seeking assistance, but Denise was not looking at her. My mother stood frozen, her gaze fixed on her own mobile device, which had just begun to ring. It was not her customary cheerful ringtone. It was a sharp, formal buzz reserved for unknown callers. Denise fumbled within her purse, her hands trembling. She withdrew the phone and stared at the screen. Her already pale countenance lost its final vestige of colour. "Mom," Chloe whispered, her own drama momentarily eclipsed. "Who is it? Is it the bank again?" Denise shook her head, her eyes wide with a novel, distinct form of apprehension. She looked up at me. I do not know," she whispered. It's Mercy Hospital." Denise stood immobile, fixated on her ringing phone. The caller identification displayed Mercy Hospital. "Mom?" Chloe's voice was a hushed query, her own distress momentarily forgotten. "Who is it? Is it the bank again?" My mother shook her head, her hand trembling as she fumbled to answer. She raised the phone to her ear. "Hello," she uttered, her voice barely audible. A pause ensued. I observed her face as the last vestiges of colour drained away. Her eyes widened not with anger but with a new hollow terror. "What?" she whispered into the receiver. "What did you say? This is Mercy Hospital." "Oh my goodness." Her knees buckled. She did not faint, but she crumpled, collapsing onto the opulent marble flooring of my entryway. The designer handbag she invariably clutched so tightly skidded away, spilling its contents. "Marcus!" she shrieked, a raw, guttural sound I had never before heard emanate from her. "Oh my goodness, Marcus, he is at the hospital." Chloe rushed to her side. "Mom, what is wrong with Dad?" Denise looked up, her face a tableau of disbelief and horror. "Your father, he suffered a cardiac arrest. He collapsed at the bank. They stated he collapsed immediately after they informed him about the foreclosure. Oh my goodness, he is in the intensive care unit." Chloe stumbled backward as if struck. "A heart attack. It is all over." Denise sobbed, striking the floor with her fist. "The house, the funds, Marcus." Chloe's head snapped towards me. The shock on her face vanished, replaced by a dark, murderous rage I had never witnessed. Her eyes were no longer merely angry. They were ablaze with pure, unadulterated hatred. "You!" she screamed, lunging at me, her fingers splayed like claws. "This is your culpability." I instinctively stepped back, but she was swift. She seized the front of my shirt, shoving me forcefully against the wall. "You orchestrated this," she screamed, her face mere inches from mine, spittle flying. "You and your perverted machinations. You curtailed the financial support. You subjected him to this stress. Should he perish? Maya, I swear to God, should he perish, I will end your existence." She was shaking me, repeatedly slamming me against the wall. "I will end your existence," Denise shrieked, scrambling to her feet. "Cease this. We must depart. We must go to the hospital immediately." Chloe held my gaze for another second, her eyes promising retribution. Then she released me, shoving me one final time, and darted towards the elevator, dragging her sobbing mother with her. The steel doors slid shut, leaving me alone in the reverberating silence of my penthouse. I slid down the wall until I was seated on the cold marble floor. My heart was pounding, my shirt was rumpled where Chloe had gripped me, and my mind was in turmoil. A heart attack. He had a genuine heart attack. Chloe's words echoed in the empty expanse. "Should he perish, I will end your existence." My stomach turned to ice. Was this my fault? I had merely reclaimed what was rightfully mine. I had only prevented them from draining me dry. But a heart attack. Was this my desired outcome? Had I just caused the demise of my own father? The metallic elevator doors descended, enclosing me in the hushed stillness of my private residence. For a full minute I remained frozen. the phantom sensation of Chloe's grip a lingering sting on my attire. Her desperate plea, "If he perishes, I shall hold you responsible," reverberated off the polished stone. Did I? The question, sharp and chilling, pierced my core. Could I have inadvertently precipitated my father's cardiac distress? I moved with an unthinking gait towards my study, the array of 6 illuminated screens awaiting my direction. The Asian financial markets were active, their graphs a tapestry of flux. This was my refuge, my bastion of intellect and figures, the domain where my authority was absolute. I settled into my leather seat. My fingers hovered over the mouse. I was incapable of clicking. My hand trembled. The ebb and flow of the verdant and crimson lines swam before my eyes, a meaningless spectacle. All that I could perceive was my father's visage, not the countenance of the man who had expelled me, but the face of the man who, a year prior, had implored me on this very floor to salvage his estate. The strain, his heart, he had always possessed a fragile heart. Denise was privy to it. Chloe was aware of it, and I had severed his financial lifeline. Regardless, I rose, unable to remain seated. I traversed the expanse of the living area, my bare soles making no sound upon the cool marble, moving from the panoramic city view to the gleaming stainless steel kitchen. "You are a disappointment," my mother's voice assailed my memory. "A scoundrel," my father's pronouncement echoed. "I will see you destroyed," my sister's cry resounded. I collapsed onto the sofa, burying my face in my hands. Was this my objective? Retribution? Was this triumph? It felt devoid of any victory. It felt repulsive. It felt empty. Then another voice, a distinct recollection, surfaced. "Should you falter, you shall rise, my child. Do not you dare relinquish your resolve." I lifted my head abruptly, as if his presence filled the room. The memory was vivid and precise. I was 8 years old. I stood on the fractured pavement of our former neighborhood, long before our era of respectability. My knee was abraded, blood staining the asphalt. My new velocipede, the azure one, lay askew on the verdant lawn. I was consumed by the hot, heavy torrent of frustrated tears. I cannot. It is too arduous. I detest it. My father, Marcus, knelt before me. He was not the same man from the preceding evening. This man wore a faded t-shirt bearing the marks of motor oil. He exuded the aroma of wood shavings and coffee. He offered no solace. He merely gestured towards my bleeding knee. "Are you irreparably damaged?" he inquired. "My knee aches," I choked out. "I made no inquiry about your knee," he stated, his tone firm yet gentle. He tapped my forehead. "I inquired if you are broken." Confused, I sniffled and shook my head. "Excellent," he declared, pulling me to my feet. "Then remount your conveyance. You tumble, you ascend, you never ever concede. Do you comprehend?" That was the man who had imparted to me the essence of fortitude, the man who had instilled in me the spirit of a combatant, the man who, in his own fashion, had furnished me with the instruments to erect this very dominion. How could he be the same individual who had branded me a rogue and cast me onto the lawn? I stood. The trembling had ceased. He was not merely my tormentor, he was my progenitor, and I could not remain here passively trading securities while he lay in an intensive care unit. I would not seek them out. I would not approach her, but I had to ascertain. I had to witness. I retrieved my keys, entered the private lift, and piloted my Tesla, my genuine vehicle, to Mercy Hospital. I parked in the visitor's garage, my heart a percussive, nauseating cadence against my ribs. I entered the sterile, antiseptic fragrance of the lobby. I followed the illuminated signs for the critical care unit. I discerned the designation, ICU waiting room 3B. Through the translucent partition I observed them. Chloe, her features ashen and contorted in fury, paced restlessly. My mother, Denise, slumped in a utilitarian chair, her face buried in her hands, weeping. I was unable to proceed. I could not enter. I was not prepared to confront them. I noticed a modest hospital canteen directly across the corridor. It was dimly lit, largely deserted, yet it afforded an unobstructed view of the waiting room portals. I entered, ordered a black coffee, a beverage I knew I would not consume, and located a small table in the deepest recess. I would simply wait, I would observe. I sat in the subdued atmosphere of the canteen, the untouched coffee cooling in my grasp. Through the glass pane, I watched the tableau unfolding in the ICU waiting area. It resembled a wordless chronicle of my family's disintegration. My mother, Denise, was no longer the imperious matriarch. She was a disheveled, sobbing figure in a rigid plastic seat. Chloe had ceased her pacing. She sat on the floor, her back against the wall, her designer attire askew. She swayed rhythmically, murmuring to herself, her face pallid and discolored. A medical professional emerged and addressed them. I could not discern their words, but I perceived the gestures. I saw my mother look upward, her expression etched with desperate appeals. I saw Chloe offer no discernible reaction, her gaze fixed blankly on the floor. A fragment of my being, the 8-year-old child yearning for paternal approval, experienced a sharp, agonizing pang of culpability. This was my doing. I had been the instrument of their downfall. I had precipitated this. Yet another, more frigid aspect of myself, the 28-year-old woman they had cast out, merely observed, I had, in essence, simply ceased remitting their financial obligations. Their reaction. My father's compromised cardiovascular system, Chloe's deceit, that was their burden. I was so thoroughly engrossed in this internal conflict that I failed to register the approaching figure until he spoke. Maya. My head snapped upwards. I almost failed to recognize him. He was incongruous. It was Ryan, Chloe's betrothed. He was attired in an expensive, impeccably tailored suit. He appeared composed, immaculate, and entirely in command. He seemed as though he had just exited a boardroom, not a familial crisis. My initial reaction was alarm. I believed he intended to confront me, to issue threats on Chloe's behalf, to complete the task my family had commenced. I braced myself. What is your objective? He offered no reply. He merely drew out the chair opposite me and sat, placing his leather satchel on the floor. He met my gaze, his azure eyes remarkably clear and analytical. I require a conversation with you, he stated. His voice was subdued, devoid of any animosity. I have nothing to impart to you, I retorted. Return to your intended. He disregarded my antagonism. He simply leaned forward slightly and uttered the words that arrested my pulse. I am aware that you did not purloin the pendant. I simply stared at him. I was incapable of respiration. What had he just communicated? He continued, his voice still low and measured. I know you are not the culprit. I know Chloe misrepresented the facts. I know this because I observed her concealing the pendant herself. My mind went utterly blank. I could not formulate a solitary utterance. I merely gazed at him, this man who was ostensibly my adversary, this man who had, within the span of 3 days, shattered my entire reality for a second time. How? I finally whispered, my voice hoarse. How could you possibly possess that knowledge? How? How could you possibly possess that knowledge? I repeated the query, my voice trembling. My thoughts raced. Was this a stratagem? Was he attempting to ensnare me? To induce a confession of some other transgression? To trap me within a different fabrication? Ryan did not appear to be engaged in a game. He seemed analytical. He cast a glance across the corridor towards the ICU waiting area. We could discern Chloe through the glass. She had risen and was now pacing with frenetic energy, her mobile device pressed to her ear, undoubtedly contacting her associates, curating the narrative of her sorrow. My mother, Denise, remained a crumpled heap in the plastic chair. He turned back to me, his azure eyes cold and lucid. "It is straightforward, Maya. I witnessed her. I possess the evidence." "Evidence?" I whispered. "What evidence?" "You were not present. You were in New York." "I am aware," he stated, "but my camera was—" I simply stared at him, bewildered. "Your camera? What are you speaking of?" Ryan reclined, taking a sip of his own coffee, which I had not even noticed him procure. He appeared entirely unfazed by the familial discord unfolding mere 50 feet away. "My family is affluent, Maya," he remarked as though discussing the prevailing weather. "We exercise caution. We safeguard our assets. And when I commenced my association with Chloe, I observed certain anomalies." "What anomalies?" I inquired, my voice barely audible. "She harbors an obsession with status," he declared, his tone lowering subtly. "And she is profoundly distrustful. She perpetually speaks of individuals envying her, of people coveting her possessions. Last month, she accused a domestic at my parents' residence of pilfering a bracelet, only to discover it in her own handbag 2 days later. She is careless, yet she assigns blame universally." I comprehended precisely his meaning. She had exhibited such tendencies since our childhood. He continued, "When my mother presented her with that pendant, Chloe's inaugural utterance was not, 'Thank you.' It was, 'Where can I secure this so that no one may abscond with it?'" He shook his head, a faint, mirthless smile gracing his lips. "My family's security contingent advised me that, given her disposition and the value of the acquisition, we ought to install a diminutive private surveillance camera in her chambers at your parents' abode." I was stunned. "A camera in her room? Does she know?" "Undoubtedly not," Ryan replied. "It is a micro camera concealed within the smoke detector. It merely records movement for insurance purposes, ironically, for her own protection." He reached into the interior pocket of his suit jacket and withdrew his mobile device. It was elegant, costly, and in that moment it appeared to be a weapon. I gave it little thought until Denise contacted me today at the hospital, babbling about you pilfering the pendant, but her narrative lacked coherence. It sounded rehearsed. He tapped the screen, his thumb scrolling. "It required some time to locate the precise temporal marker," he stated, "but I found it shortly after supper, immediately subsequent to your spillage of the liquid." He turned the device around and placed it on the diminutive canteen table between us. He initiated playback. "You ought to observe this, Maya." My hand trembled so severely that I had to grip the edge of the table. I gazed at the screen. My heart throbbed with such intensity that I could feel it in my throat. A sickly, heavy rhythm. I held my breath as the visual sequence commenced. I stared at the phone display. My heart felt like a frozen stone within my chest. Ryan commenced playback. The visual was silent, yet the clarity was impeccable. The perspective was elevated from the apex of the ceiling, overlooking Chloe's meticulously adorned chamber. The timestamp in the corner indicated Sunday evening, mere moments after I had inadvertently spilled the beverage. I observed Chloe enter her room, but she displayed no frantic demeanor. She was not weeping. Her movements were sharp, deliberate, and imbued with anger. She slammed her bedroom door shut, and to my dismay, I witnessed her secure it. She stood centrally within the room for an instant, her back to the lens, and I could perceive the tension in her shoulders. Subsequently, she proceeded with composure to her vanity, where her jewelry resided. The diamond pendant lay precisely there. She did not seize it in haste. She retrieved it, examined it, and then moved towards her wardrobe. She displaced a row of opulent footwear, and entered a code into a small, black vault I had never before perceived. She deposited the pendant within, closed the substantial door, and spun the dial. She had concealed it herself. My breath hitched. I was witnessing the orchestration of a transgression. Chloe then positioned herself before her mirror. She conversed with herself, her features contorting. I could not discern the words, but I could observe the wrath. She was clearly rehearsing. She paced the room, then halted. A novel, sickeningly brilliant notion seemed to dawn upon her visage. A small, cruel smile materialized. She returned to her door, unlocked it, and peered into the corridor. "Wait," Ryan whispered, his voice startling me. "Observe this. She is altering the vantage point. This is the transmission from the corridor camera." He tapped the screen. The perspective shifted. It was a grainy, monochrome depiction of the upstairs hallway. I saw Chloe emerge from her chamber, survey her surroundings, and then creep towards my bedroom door. She gained ingress. She was within for less than a minute. "Now," Ryan stated, his voice grim. "Return to her room. This is the segment that repulsed me." He switched the feed back to the high-definition color camera. Chloe re-entered her room. She held a diminutive silver object in her hand. "Good heavens," I whispered. I recognized it instantaneously. That is my hair ornament, the one I have been searching for all week." I watched, paralyzed, as Chloe approached her own divan. She lifted her own pillow, placed my hair ornament beneath it, and then pressed the pillow down firmly. She had meticulously planned every detail, the fabrication, the evidence, every constituent element. Finally, she stood before her full-length looking-glass. She inhaled deeply, theatrically. She deliberately disheveled her own coiffure, rubbing her eyes with vigor to induce redness. She adopted a frantic, gasping expression, and then she parted her lips and emitted a silent scream, which on the video was soundless, but I recalled its auditory manifestation from downstairs. She screamed, and then she bolted from the room, leaving the portal ajar, to execute the final act of her staged performance. The video concluded. I was immobile. My blood felt like frigid water. This was not merely a moment of envious rage. This was premeditated. This was callous. This was malevolent. She orchestrated it all," I whispered, my gaze fixed on the dark screen. "She conspired to incriminate me." Ryan slowly locked his phone and returned it to his pocket. He looked at me, his expression somber. "That is not even the most egregious aspect, Maya. That is not even the most egregious aspect, Maya." I raised my eyes from the dark screen of Ryan's phone, my mind still reeling from the visual record. What? What could possibly be more grievous than that? She orchestrated it. She falsely accused me of a felony. "The visual recording depicts her actions," Ryan stated, his voice grave. This is a reflection of who she is and who your mother is. What are you comprehending?" "When Chloe was unable to contact you this morning," he elucidated, "she contacted me. She was hysterical, vociferating about her tuition fees. Following her termination of our conversation, she finally managed to reach your mother. I have been concerned regarding her mental state." My blood ran cold. "You recorded her discourse with my mother." "Indeed, and you must hear this. This was from approximately 9:30 this morning, preceding your father's admission to the hospital." He tapped his phone once more and a new display appeared. It was an audio file. He initiated playback. I heard my sister's voice, thick with panic and fury. "Mom, finally, she did it. She halted my tuition. Parsons has issued me a final ultimatum. My vehicle is next. She is annihilating my existence." Then my mother's voice, but not the sobbing figure I observed in the waiting room. This voice was a low, conspiratorial whisper. "Lower your intonation, Chloe. Your father is currently at the financial institution. He is endeavouring to negotiate with them to ascertain if he can secure a bridging loan or some similar arrangement. He is attempting to persuade them. A loan? Chloe shrieked. Persuade? Are you jesting with me? We are bankrupt. This is entirely Maya's culpability. She is dismantling us on the precipice of the nuptials. She intends to humiliate me. I am aware, my child, I am aware, my mother soothed. I am contemplating. We require her to reinstate the funds. We require leverage. There was a protracted interval of silence. I simply stared at the device, my heart pounding. Then my mother's voice resurfaced, but it had undergone a transformation. It was artful. It was frigid. What if? What if we inform her that it is your father's cardiac condition? Chloe appeared perplexed. What? As in he is unwell? He is well. No, you are not heeding, Denise stated impatiently. We inform her that the shock of the foreclosure notice proved excessively taxing for him. We inform her that he has been hospitalized. We inform her that he suffered a myocardial infarction. Another silence, briefer this time. Then Chloe's voice, measured and filled with a dawning, dreadful admiration. Mum, that is brilliant. A cardiac arrest. Oh, that is perfect. He is in the ICU, my mother continued, her voice gaining confidence. The physicians are uncertain of his prognosis, all attributable to the stress she precipitated. Chloe actually emitted a brief, sharp, unpleasant laugh. Let us observe the heartless individual disregard that. She will be compelled to reinstate everything. She would not wish to bear responsibility for causing her own father's demise. The audio file terminated. Ryan deactivated it. The silence of the canteen was profound. I could not feel my hands. I could not feel my feet. I could only perceive my mother's and sister's pronouncements echoing repeatedly within my mind. That is brilliant. Let us observe the heartless individual disregard that. They had plotted to fabricate a cardiac event. I looked at Ryan, my voice a fractured whisper. The cardiac event, it was entirely fictitious. Ryan observed me, his expression unreadable. He slowly shook his head, and the minuscule measure of relief I had experienced, the hope that this was all merely a grotesque, manufactured charade, evaporated. Oh no, he stated, his voice subdued. The cardiac event is very, very real. He is presently in the ICU. The medical professionals harbor genuine apprehension. I was utterly disoriented. But the audio, I stammered, they planned it. Chloe declared it brilliant. Yes, Ryan replied, his voice hardened. They did plan it. That is what you must grasp, Maya. Their initial impulse was not to resolve the predicament. Their initial impulse was to devise a fabrication, a colossal manipulative falsehood to coerce you into returning their funds. He leaned forward, his voice dropping even lower. The audio recording you have just heard originates from 9:30 this morning. They were formulating a plan to feign a cardiac episode. They were conspiring to employ emotional coercion. But then what transpired? The truth, evidently, Ryan stated, and he appeared genuinely perturbed. Following the discourse between your mother and sister, your father, Marcus, drove to the financial establishment. He was attempting to procure a new line of credit, a loan, anything secured against the residence for which you were secretly discharging the mortgage payments. He paused, allowing the implications to coalesce for me. The bank manager, naturally, conducted a credit assessment. He observed the cancelled credit cards. He noted the returned payment for the BMW, and he witnessed the pending foreclosure notice pertaining to the residence. He ascertained that any financial support your father might have possessed had vanished. The bank manager unequivocally informed him, no loan, no further disbursements. Ryan shook his head slowly. According to the communication Denise received from the medical facility, your father stood up. His face began to redden and he clutched his chest. He collapsed precisely within the bank manager's office. The cardiac event was genuine. I simply stared at him, my mind struggling to process the sheer, twisted depravity of it all. They had intended to falsify the very occurrence that had, in reality, transpired. The cosmos, in a dark and terrible fashion, had delivered their fabrication for them. Ryan observed my stunned silence, his own countenance grim. Your family, Maya, he stated slowly, his voice imbued with a profound, sickening revulsion. They are terrifying. I gazed at Ryan. My mind could not reconcile the man before me with the individual Chloe was ostensibly to wed. He was composed, he was systematic. He had just presented me with visual and auditory evidence that my entire family was conspiring against me. He was supposed to be aligned with them. He represented their gateway to the elevated social strata they craved. Why? I finally whispered, my throat parched. Why are you divulging this to me? She is your fiancée. I scrutinized him carefully. This had to be a deception. He desired something. Perhaps he anticipated my yielding the funds in exchange for this disclosure. Ryan finished his coffee, setting the cup down with a quiet, deliberate click. He was no longer observing the waiting room. He was looking directly at me. My family possesses wealth, Maya, he stated, his voice even. That is not a clandestine fact, but my grandfather did not construct his enterprise through falsehood and deceit. He built it upon repute. We adhere to principles. We possess a code. One does not defraud individuals. One does not pilfer. And one certainly does not betray one's own kin for a modicum of currency or a more advantageous social standing. He leaned in slightly. I had perceived Chloe as merely pampered. I had considered her somewhat self-important, fixated on appearances. I can tolerate pampering. It is commonplace in my milieu. But this, he stated, gesturing back towards the ICU waiting room, this is not pampered. This is corrupted. This is a fundamental character deficiency. He shook his head, appearing genuinely disturbed. To frame one's own sister, to plot and scheme to defraud her, to lie about a cardiac event, to engage in blackmail. I cannot enter into matrimony with such a person. I cannot introduce such corruption into my lineage. He paused and his voice turned cold. She didn't simply deceive you, Maya. She's been misleading me as well. She painted a picture of you as unstable. She claimed you were a financial burden on your parents. She warned me you were dangerous. She meticulously crafted a false narrative where she appeared to be the victim of your alleged instability. It finally clicked for me. He wasn't here for my benefit. He was looking out for himself. He was assembling his evidence. He was cutting his losses. He was safeguarding his family's reputation and his own future from the destructive influence he had just uncovered. He possessed the video recording. He had the audio evidence. He held the undeniable truth. My family had just forfeited their golden opportunity, and they were completely unaware of it. I observed him, this unexpected, detached, and surprisingly truthful ally. I took a shaky breath, my focus shifting from victimhood to resilience. So, I inquired, my voice a low, steady rumble, what is your next move? Ryan's expression was somber. He looked at me, the unexpected sister of the woman he was meant to marry. I'm going to do what is right, he stated finally, his tone flat, utterly devoid of emotion. He turned and gazed across the corridor toward the ICU waiting area. Through the glass we could discern two figures, their forms blurred by the reflection. Chloe was now pacing, her movements agitated. Denise remained slumped in her chair. He turned back to me. But I require your presence with me. I recoiled as if he had proposed I leap from a precipice. What, go in there now with them after? I trailed off, unable to articulate my dread. I cannot, I refuse. Yes, you will, Ryan countered. It was not a suggestion. It was a pronouncement of fact. They are about to witness my arrival. They will believe their rescuer has appeared. Your mother will assume her manipulative phone calls have yielded results. Chloe will be convinced her ingenious fabrication of a heart attack was so compelling it actually succeeded. I could vividly imagine their expressions, the immediate surge of relief, followed by their swift return to their rehearsed script. Oh, Ryan, thank goodness you're here. Maya has created such a predicament, but now you can resolve it. They would undoubtedly leverage him to cover the hospital expenses, leaving me branded as the villain. I couldn't care less what they believe, I whispered, shaking my head. I simply wish to go home. You have the evidence. You are ending your engagement with her. Just go. Exclude me from this. Ryan slowly shook his head. No, you fail to grasp the situation, Maya. Individuals like them, your family, they do not cease their machinations. They orchestrated a felony charge against you. They were preparing to emotionally manipulate you before your father even reached the bank. They will perpetually strive to control you, and they will never cease to assign blame to you. His words struck me with the impact of a physical blow. He was absolutely correct. They will hold you accountable for this heart attack, he declared, his voice as frigid as ice. They will attribute the failed wedding to you. They will inform every relative, every acquaintance that their idyllic existence crumbled due to your instability. They will decimate your reputation. You will never achieve freedom from this unless you confront it. Unless we confront it together. He observed the nascent flicker of doubt in my eyes and pressed onward. They must be exposed not merely to me, they need to be exposed to one another. Your mother must learn that her prized child is a common thief. Your sister must witness the unraveling of her cunning scheme. And your father... My father, I echoed, the memory of him teaching me to ride a bicycle flashing through my mind. Your father, Ryan finished my thought, needs to see precisely who he cast out of his home. I glanced across the hallway. I saw Chloe, the sister who had meticulously planned my downfall while I funded her education. I saw Denise, the mother who had devised a scheme to extort me with a fabricated illness. The guilt that had consumed me moments before dissolved, replaced by the same chilling, stark clarity from the night they had expelled me. The 8-year-old girl, terrified of disappointing her dad, was no more. In her place sat the 28-year-old woman who had forged an empire from nothing, the woman who had been financing their entire deception. I rose to my feet. The untouched coffee cup remained on the table, a forgotten prop. You are correct, I stated. My voice was no longer trembling. It was resolute. It was cold. They are in there, awaiting their intended victim. They anticipate the failure that is Maya, returning to grovel for absolution, prepared to settle the hospital bills. I met Ryan's gaze, this peculiar, calculating man who had instantaneously become the most formidable ally I had ever encountered. They have been anticipating the conclusion of this act, I said. Very well, let us provide them with their grand finale. Ryan offered a single nod, a fleeting glint of approval in his steely eyes. He stood and retrieved his leather briefcase. He appeared immaculate, like a legal professional entering a closing argument, not a man poised to detonate his own life. I adjusted my shirt, the one Chloe had once clutched, and twisted. I ran my fingers through my hair. I felt an icy resolve settle within me. They are in waiting room 3B, he informed me. I am aware, I replied. Together we exited the dim confines of the cafe and proceeded across the stark, brightly illuminated hospital corridor. Each footstep resonated. I could now see them clearly through the glass. Denise was gently stroking Chloe's back. We paused just outside the door. I looked at Ryan. He looked at me. "Ready?" he inquired. "Let's conclude this," I responded. I pushed open the door to waiting room 3B. The mingled sense of antiseptic and stale coffee assailed me, the unmistakable aroma of fear. They were all present, precisely as Ryan had predicted, huddled together in the dim illumination of the small beige room. My father, Marcus, lay in the hospital bed, propped up by pillows. He appeared diminished, smaller than I had ever perceived him. The imposing, formidable man who had forcibly ejected me onto the lawn merely 2 nights prior was gone. In his stead was a pallid, frail-looking man, his eyes closed, an oxygen tube inserted into his nose. He appeared stable, yet exceedingly vulnerable. My mother, Denise, and my sister, Chloe, occupied the hard plastic chairs beside him. Their expensive coats were draped over the chair backs, appearing out of place in this sterile environment. They looked utterly exhausted. They looked consumed by terror. The instant the door latch clicked, my mother's head snapped up. Her eyes, swollen and red-rimmed from weeping, widened with an expression I couldn't immediately decipher. It wasn't anger. It wasn't relief. It was pure calculation. "Maya!" she gasped. She scrambled to her feet with such haste that her chair screeched loudly across the linoleum floor. "Oh, thank God, Maya, you're here, your father!" She surged toward me, her hands outstretched as if to embrace me. As if she hadn't physically struck me, as if she hadn't stood idly by while I was expelled from her home, I remained motionless. I simply stood in the doorway. My arms were crossed, my face a mask of frigid impassivity. Her hands halted their awkward hovering in the air between us as she realized I would not adopt the persona of the forgiving, long-suffering daughter. He has been asking for you," she stammered, shifting her approach, attempting a different tactic. From the bed, I heard a weak, rasping sound. "Maya!" I glanced over. My father's eyes were open. They were fixed upon me. They were filled with a raw, desperate fear I had never before witnessed in him. "Maya!" he articulated again, his voice a dry whisper. He attempted to lift his hand. "Please, you must rescue us. You must save the family." He struggled for breath. I implore you, save the family. The same family that had branded me a thief. The same family that had deemed me a failure. The same family that had cast me out into the biting cold. They did not desire me. They coveted my bank account. Chloe, who had been staring blankly at the floor, finally lifted her gaze. Her face was ashen, her makeup smudged. The arrogant golden child was gone. She appeared small and frightened. She leaned toward my mother. Her voice, a terrified, frantic whisper, was none the less audible to everyone in the room. "Mom, it's true, I just spoke with the billing department again." She was crying genuine tears of panic. "The doctor said our insurance, it's not working. They cancelled the policy." The news of the cancelled insurance policy hung heavy in the sterile air, akin to a death sentence. My mother, Denise, was now openly sobbing, her face buried in her hands. "It's all over," she wailed. "We're ruined. Marcus, what are we going to do?" My father, Marcus, was simply staring at me. His complexion was grey, but his eyes were sharp. He was no longer pleading. He was merely observing me as if finally comprehending the magnitude of his miscalculation. But Chloe perceived my silence and misinterpreted it as guilt. She saw my composure and mistook it for weakness. She believed I was finally cornered, utterly broken by the reality of our father's heart attack. She scrambled to her feet, her tear-streaked face contorting back into that familiar, arrogant sneer. "Do you comprehend what you have wrought?" she hissed at me, her voice low and furious. "Look at him, you orchestrated this. Your pathetic little tantrum. You have practically killed him." I remained by the door, unmoving. I uttered not a single word. I simply met her gaze. My silence only intensified her rage. She took a step toward me. "This is entirely your fault, but you can still rectify it, Maya." I nearly laughed. "Rectify it?" "Yes," she affirmed, as if addressing a child of limited intellect. "All of this, the house, the car, the tuition, even this." She gestured wildly toward my father in his hospital bed. "All of it will vanish if you simply offer an apology." "Apologize to Ryan?" she snapped, her voice escalating. "He's the one with the financial resources. He's the one who can mend all of this. You simply need to approach him. Get on your knees if you must. You tell him you lied. You tell him you stole the necklace out of jealousy, and you beg him to forgive me for the chaos you've caused." She took a shaky breath, a wild, calculating glint in her eyes. "If you do that, he will return. He will settle the hospital bills. He will pay for the house. He will cover everything. All you need to do is speak the truth for once and admit that you are the one who lied." She appeared so self-satisfied, so confident in her twisted scheme. She still viewed Ryan as her escape route. She still believed she was in control. I looked at her, this sister who had framed me. I looked at my mother, who was now nodding in agreement, a glimmer of hope dawning on her tear-stained face. I looked at my father, who was merely observing silently, waiting. They were all expecting me to offer myself as a sacrifice on the altar of Chloe's happiness. One final time. A small, cold smile touched my lips. "Apologize to Ryan?" I inquired, my voice dangerously quiet. "Apologize to Ryan?" I allowed the question to linger in the sterile, desperate atmosphere of the hospital room. Chloe, my sister, perceived my smile and mistook it for weakness. She believed I was trapped. She genuinely thought she had triumphed. "Yes," she snapped, latching onto what she perceived as a lifeline. "He will listen to me. He loves me. But he is a man of principle, Maya. He needs to hear you confess your actions. He needs to know you regret stealing and for all this drama you've instigated." My mother, Denise, scrambled to her feet, her face a mask of desperate, contorted hope. "She's right, Maya. Oh, baby, please just tell Ryan you're sorry. Tell him you were upset. He's a good man. He's a generous man. He will understand. He can fix this. He can pay the hospital bill." Even my father, Marcus, lifted his head from the pillow, his voice a weak rasp. "Do it, Maya. Do as your mother says. Apologize. Rectify this mess you've created." They were all fixated on me, all three of them, begging, demanding, imploring me to sacrifice myself, once more, to lie, to accept the blame, to shield them from the repercussions of their own conduct. I held their gaze for a long, silent moment. I allowed their desperation to permeate the room. Then I turned my head slightly, directing my gaze toward the open doorway of the waiting room, situated directly behind where they were gathered. "That is a most intriguing proposition," I remarked, my voice clear and amplified. "But why don't you pose that question to him yourselves, Ryan? You may enter now." Time seemed to freeze. My mother's hopeful expression solidified, then fractured. My father's head slumped back onto the pillow in bewilderment. Chloe, who had been standing with a smug, problem-solving look on her face, spun around so rapidly she nearly lost her balance. Ryan was standing in the doorway. He exhibited no panic. He displayed no stress. He was dressed in his impeccable suit, his leather briefcase in hand, exuding an air of calm detachment, as if he were walking into a coffee shop. "Ryan!" Chloe shrieked. It was a sound of pure primal terror. She lunged toward him, her hands outstretched. Ryan, oh, thank God you're here. You have to listen to me. Maya, she's lost her mind. She's attempting to destroy us. She attempted to grasp his arm to re-establish their alliance. Ryan took a single, deliberate step backward, causing her hands to fall awkwardly into the empty space between them. He did not look at my mother or my father. His cold blue eyes were fixed solely on Chloe. Why are you with her? Chloe demanded, her voice escalating to a frantic pitch as she pointed a trembling finger at me. Did she contact you? What fabrications did she feed you? She didn't communicate anything to me, Chloe, Ryan stated, his voice devoid of inflection. He slowly reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket. I am merely here, he announced, to return this. He held up his hand. In his palm, gleaming under the harsh fluorescent lights of the hospital room, rested the engagement ring. It was colossal, a 3-carat diamond that had been the subject of my mother's proud, hushed pronouncements for months. Chloe gasped, and for a fleeting moment, her entire face illuminated with a terrible, desperate hope. She genuinely believed he was present to propose anew, to mend everything, to place the ring back on her finger and settle all the bills. Ryan, she breathed, her voice suddenly syrupy, taking a step toward him. Oh, Ryan, I knew you would comprehend. Ryan didn't even glance at her. His gaze remained fixed on my father, Marcus, the man lying weak and helpless in the bed. With a flick of his wrist, Ryan tossed the ring. It did not sail toward Chloe. It landed on the thin hospital blanket covering my father's legs, where it bounced once before settling with a dull, heavy finality. It is over, Ryan declared. His voice held no anger. It was simply empty. We are concluded, Chloe. The silence in the room was absolute. My mother, Denise, looked at the ring on the blanket, then at Ryan, her mouth agape in a silent scream. Chloe simply stared at the ring. She stared at it as if it were a serpent. Then she snapped. It wasn't a sob. It was a shriek, a raw, guttural sound of an animal ensnared. No! She screamed, her head whipping toward me. This is you. You contacted him, didn't you? You lied to him. You manipulated him. She lunged at me again, but Ryan, anticipating her move, simply stepped into her path. He did not touch her, he merely blocked her. Get out of my way, Ryan, she sobbed, attempting to maneuver around him. She orchestrated this. She deceived you. She has always been a deceiver. She is the one who pilfered the necklace to frame me. She is the one who has been endeavoring to ruin my existence. She turned her tear-streaked, blotchy face toward her fiancé. Ryan, darling, please disregard her words. She is deranged. She is unstable. She is fabricating falsehoods. Ryan remained impassive, allowing her tirade to wash over him. He waited until she paused to inhale, her chest heaving. He looked at her, his face a mask of cold disappointment. Really? He inquired, his voice dangerously low. She is fabricating. She is unstable. He slowly reached into his suit jacket and withdrew his phone. He held it up, the screen illuminated. Then what of the video? He inquired. What of the video, Chloe? Of you entirely alone, meticulously concealing that very necklace within your own bedroom safe. Chloe's words hung suspended in the air, a desperate final falsehood. She's lying, she's unstable, she fabricated the entire thing. Ryan didn't even glance at her. His gaze was fixed on my parents. Is she? He asked, his voice chillingly calm. He turned the phone, the screen still glowing, toward the hospital bed where my father, Marcus, lay. He held it up so that both Marcus and my mother, Denise, could view it clearly. Then you should observe this, Ryan stated, both of you. He pressed play. I watched my parents' expressions. Initially, there was only confusion. They saw Chloe's bedroom on the screen. They witnessed her slam the door and lock it. My mother's brow furrowed. "What is this?" she whispered. Then they observed as the silent image of their golden child, their perfect daughter, calmly walked to her dresser, retrieved the diamond necklace, and secured it in a concealed safe. I saw my father's hand clench the thin hospital blanket. They watched as Chloe ventured into the hallway, slipped into my room, and returned with my silver hair clip. They witnessed her lift her own pillow and plant the evidence. My mother's hand flew to her mouth, a small, strangled gasp escaping her lips. In that instant, she knew I had spoken the truth, but the video was not yet concluded. They watched in horrified, profound silence as their daughter stood before a mirror, rubbing her eyes raw. They watched her feign a look of panic. They observed her rehearse her own fabricated hysteria. And finally, they watched her mouth open in a silent scream before rushing out of the room to frame her sister. The video concluded. My father appeared as if he had been struck by lightning. He was staring at Chloe, his face ashen, his mouth agape. My mother was shaking her head, murmuring, "No, no, no, no." Over and over, Chloe perceived their expressions. She recognized that her deception had been exposed, and she fractured. "It's fake!" she shrieked, lunging across the bed, attempting to wrest the phone from Ryan's grasp. "It's not real. She edited it. She's a computer whiz. She faked it. Tell them, Ryan. Tell them it's fake." Ryan calmly withdrew the phone just beyond her reach. He looked at her, his face a mask of utter disgust. "It is not fake, Chloe," he stated, his voice flat, "and it is not the sole piece of evidence I possess." He tapped his phone screen again, accessing a different file, an audio recording. "So," he inquired, his voice dangerously quiet, "do you also wish to elucidate the recording of you and your mother from this morning, planning to fabricate a heart attack?" Ryan's final question. "Do you also wish to elucidate the recording of you and your mother from this morning, planning to fabricate a heart attack?" Struck with the impact of a physical explosion, Chloe simply froze. Her mouth, which had been open in a silent scream, remained suspended. But my mother, Denise, reacted. She emitted a small choking sound as if struggling for air. Her eyes, wide with terror, darted from Ryan to me and then to Marcus in the hospital bed. She knew she had been the one to suggest it. She was just as culpable as Chloe. She did not simply sit down, she collapsed. Her legs gave out from beneath her and she fell backward into the hard plastic visitor's chair. Her designer handbag slid from her lap, spilling its contents across the floor. Lipstick, keys, and a compact scattered like debris. She didn't even notice. She simply stared into the middle distance. Her entire facade, her entire image of a respectable family, shattered in a single second. My father, Marcus, had been observing the unfolding scene with growing bewilderment, but at the mention of the word recording, at the suggestion of a clandestine plan between his wife and his favored daughter, his expression transformed. The anger he had harbored toward me dissipated. The frailty brought on by his heart attack was supplanted by a new, terrible clarity. He pushed himself up onto his elbows. His eyes, which had been dulled with pain, were now sharp and filled with a dawning, sickening realization. He was no longer looking at me. He was staring at Chloe, his golden child. "Chloe!" he rasped, his voice a dry, horrified whisper. What have you done?" That was the moment. That was the final fatal blow. It wasn't Ryan's accusation. It wasn't my mother's collapse. It was my father's question. The man who had enabled her, the man who had adored her, the man who had banished me to protect her. He finally saw her. Chloe looked at Ryan, her conduit to wealth, who now stood as a cold, disgusted executioner. She looked at me, the perceived failure, standing silently, witnessing her world ignite. She looked at her mother, a weeping, broken woman on the floor. Finally, her gaze met her father's, whose eyes burned with pure, unadulterated disdain. All was lost. The wealth, the marital bliss, the social standing, the doting parents, the entire family unit, even the DN, every last shred had vanished. She had gambled too high, and in her desperate attempt to bring me down, she had only succeeded in dismantling her own life. 3, 4, 5 agonizing seconds of silence ticked by. Then Chloe threw her head back, her face a contorted mask of raw, agonizing despair. A guttural sound escaped her lips, not a word, but a primal animalistic cry of utter desolation that reverberated through the sterile confines of the ICU waiting area. Chloe's shriek filled the room, a horrifying testament to a creature trapped. On the floor, my mother, Denise, remained a crumpled, sobbing mess, murmuring, "It's over. Everything is over." My father, Marcus, simply fixated on Chloe, his features slack and ashen as if he were truly seeing his precious golden child for the first time. And I was a picture of absolute tranquility. While a tempest raged around me and profound stillness settled within, Ryan met my gaze, his eyes querying, "What next?" I offered him a subtle nod. His role was complete. This final act was mine alone. I moved deliberately through the surrounding chaos, stepping over my mother, who remained oblivious. I passed my sister, now a puddle of incoherent lamentations. "No, it's unjust. It's utterly unfair." I approached my father's hospital bed, his body taut with apprehension as I drew near. He averted his gaze, bracing himself, perhaps anticipating a torrent of accusations or an outburst of fury. Yet I offered none of that. Reaching into the handbag he had carelessly discarded on the lawn 2 nights prior, I retrieved a thick, meticulously organized folder. It contained documents from my legal counsel, prepared precisely for this juncture. I did not hurl it, I did not slam it down. Instead, I gently placed it on the thin hospital covering his legs, right beside the gaudy, now worthless engagement ring. "What is this?" my father stammered, his voice quivering, regarding the folder as if it were an explosive device. "That," I stated, my voice soft yet penetrating the hushed room, "is an itemized account. It represents every expense I have personally borne for this family, from the day you and Mum knelt before me on the floor, imploring me to bail you out." His eyes flickered to the cover page. $180,450, I declared, enunciating each syllable with precision. "That sum encompasses the mortgage on your residence, her educational expenses, the lease on her BMW, and the very family health insurance policy you're all so desperately concerned about at this moment." I glanced from my mother on the floor to my father in the bed. "I believe this adequately covers any debt incurred from my upbringing. The privilege of you providing sustenance and shelter for me has been more than repaid." I leaned in slightly, ensuring he could clearly hear my whispered words. "As of 2 nights ago, all financial disbursements have ceased permanently. I have already communicated with the bank. You have 30 days to vacate the property before foreclosure proceedings commence. Chloe's vehicle will be repossessed tomorrow, and the hospital expenses? Well, I suppose you'll have to manage those on your own." My father's free hand began to tremble uncontrollably. His fingers fumbled at the folder's edge, his eyes wide with dawning horror as he surveyed the extensive list of figures. The tremor intensified, rendering him incapable of holding the folder, which slipped from his grasp and landed on the floor, scattering the detailed record of his own financial dependency. Denise, my mother, finally pushed herself up from the floor, her face a mask of smeared makeup and utter terror. She took in the folder, the engagement ring, Chloe's catatonic state, and me, poised by the exit. She lunged not at me but towards me. Her fingers clutched my arm, her nails digging in. "Maya!" she pleaded, her voice a hoarse, raspy whisper. Maya, please, you cannot do this to us. We are your family. I simply looked at her hand on my arm, the same hand that had once struck me and felt nothing. Your father, she choked out, gesturing wildly towards the man in the bed. He just had a heart attack. He is in critical condition. You cannot simply